Welcome to the Restoration Activation Project video commentary series. Hi, Mary Ann here, and I'm glad you could be with me. In this commentary, I'm going to be addressing and exploring the topic of relationships with a twist. I'm going to be sort of giving you some suggestions and ideas of how to take your understandings of higher order knowledge of objective truth and apply them in your real world situations, your day-to-day life interactions and unfoldments, but in this case, in particular, around relationships within the context of the 7 principles of creation, so that you start getting an idea of how to actually bring these higher order understandings into your day-to-day life situations. Okay? And there are 7 primary principles of creation, and I'm not sure I'll make it through all 7 today, but if not, I'll do a follow-up video to walk you through all of them. And that's the contextual framework through which you can begin practicing the application of higher order knowledge for purposes of self-mastery attainment, which in turn is for the purpose of higher order creations, transformation of self in your own life, and ultimately transformation of our shared reality. And remember, the name of the game is always about continually seeking. They don't call us seekers for nothing, because we're continually seeking higher and higher levels of awareness of knowledge of the totality of objective truth. And for a little more information about that, you can look at my last video. I'll put a link below so that you can do that. And I'm also going to include a link to the article on my website wherein the 7 principles of creation are laid out, and you can follow along with me as I proceed through each one of them in the context of relationship and from the context of the 7 principles of creation. Okay? So here we go. One moment, and you can follow along with me here. The first principle of creation is the principle of mentalism. Consciousness is mind. All creations begin with a thought. Thoughts lead to the manifestation of things and events. Our thoughts create our conditions of existence, both in our personal lives and reality as a whole, and the quality of experience in this reality. And we are responsible for all of our thoughts. And to accept responsibility for everything we create is to become consciously aware and attain mastery of our thoughts. Okay. So now, in the context of relationship, now I want you to bring to mind a particular relationship in your life. In this case, let's keep it to adults, because children, it's a little bit different. But think of an important adult relationship in your life, whether it's significant other, a close friend, someone that you work with, your employer, if you know them, if you have, some connection with him or her. But bring a specific relationship to mind. Okay? Now, become fully present moment focused You're thinking about yourself in relationship with this other person. And, this is a biggie, assuming the witness perspective. You put aside emotions. You put aside thoughts. You're a non-psychologically, non-emotionally vested observer, because certain things are going to come to mind as I move through this. You're going to be recalling certain situations, certain unfoldments with this individual in the context of the 7 principles of creation, okay? So take a few deep breaths. Take what I call pause breath, wherein you breathe into the count of 4, hold your breath to the count of 4, and release to the count of 4. And do that 3 times. Stop this video. You can continue playing it when you're finished, all right? I'll be here. Okay, now that you've cleared, you're more centered, you're present moment focused, you've assumed the witness, the non-emotionally, non-psychologically vested observer perspective. Okay, now, the principle of mentalism. Let's say in this relationship that there was a recent disagreement. You and this other person perhaps had a spat or maybe a knockdown, drag-out argument. So recall that type of situation, or you can also recall a more progressive-oriented unfoldment that you recently had with this person, where things just went smoothly. There was good interaction, smooth flow, smooth interchange. It doesn't matter. Just pick one. Okay? Bring that to mind. And this really works better if your eyes are closed, so that you're really focused. Okay? Now, looking at that unfoldment within the context of the principle of mentalism, recall what you were thinking, what you said, and how those thoughts and those words, those actions, bringing those thoughts into manifestation. Consider carefully, or what you were thinking before you had this interaction with the other person. What was your focus thoughts just prior to this interaction? Because that also contributed to the unfoldment of this particular interaction. Mind. You are consciousness expressed in physical form. Mind is the interface between core self, soul, and your core self, your oversoul. That is the interface. That is how the information flowing both from us to these higher order entities, versions of ourselves, and from them to us. Mind is the interface. Brain is the processor. It is the means by which we are able to interpret and translate higher order communications. And even, 3D level communications with others. Brain is merely the processor. It's an important part of the mind-body complex. But mind, and mind is consciousness. And thoughts that come to us from the mental plane come into us through mind, by way of mind. So step back with that principle in mind and consider what you were thinking just prior to, what you were thinking during the course of the interchange, and how each and every thought impacted the unfoldment of that interchange. Whether your thoughts were spoken or not, doesn't matter. Giving thoughts vocalization, they're already manifest as thoughts if you're thinking them. But vocalizing them adds an extra level of creative impact. Does that make sense? It adds more force behind it. But don't be thinking that just thinking something doesn't have an impact, because it does. Just about as powerful. Not quite, but it does. It affects everything. What you're thinking in every situation in your life, whether you're speaking it or not, affects how these events and situations unfold. Everything you're thinking, particularly focused thought. If you're on a train of thought, you're caught up in a cycle of thought, an old pattern of thought, or even a thought form. So make notes. Write down what you were thinking. Right now, just make a few notes so that you can come back and look at the unfoldment within the context of what you were thinking as you went into it, what you were thinking as the unfoldment progressed, and as it finished. Mind, thoughts, consciousness. How did your thoughts contribute to the unfoldment of that particular situation? And take responsibility for it, because that situation did not unfold in a vacuum. Even if the particular person, the particular situation that you've brought to mind, perhaps you were just sitting, perhaps you were just minding your own business, you were doing something else, and this individual came up to you and unloaded a stream of regressive dominant thoughts. What were you thinking prior to that unfoldment? And again, this is not about blame. Either you're blaming yourself or the other person. That's emotional, psychological investment. That's an ego perspective. To blame, to pass judgment. We're working on discernment here for the purpose of you taking responsibility for your thoughts, ultimately learning to master them. That's the purpose here. Not about blame, self-recrimination, or judgment of the other. We're doing a study here. So make notes, and remember, I discussed, and I'll put links to that video. I recently did a commentary on an interview that James Bartley did with Jerry Marzinski, and I speak in depth as to where our thoughts come from, how and why they come to us. And so, and the fact that even if you are a progressive dominant co-creator of your personal reality and contribute in that way to our shared reality, we do not comprise no one entity, no matter how advanced, what level of awareness, what density they're working through. No one being or entity is or can be 100% regressive dominant or progressive dominant. So there's always a little hook into which, if we're not present moment awareness focused, little energetic hooks into which regressive dominant beings can hook into. And that's not to say that that's always the reason a regressive dominant being or entity may be wanting to interact, trying to interact with you. Because there is another dynamic that takes place as you progress along the self-mastery process. The higher levels of consciousness that you begin attaining, the more you clear out distortions in the mind-body complex, the higher your vibratory rate increases. Another dynamic comes into play, and this is a dynamic wherein the regressive being or beings begin to see you as a threat because you are tapping into your potential for moving beyond your baseline vibratory, energetic, vibratory signature. Anyway, that'll be addressed in something that I'm working on, that hopefully will be out in the next couple of months. I'm working on a book about, you guessed it, self-mastery. And that topic also will be addressed in depth. And I'll discuss the book a little bit more at the end of this video or the next. But anyway, okay, principle of mentalism, your thoughts, because thoughts are a form of energy as well. So where were you? And I know it might be difficult. So it's better if you're using a recent past interaction that you're working with here today, okay? Recent past, something that's pretty fresh on your mind, pretty clear. Again, whether it was a more progressive oriented or a more regressive oriented interaction, doesn't matter, okay? So now, looking at the second principle of creation, the principle of correspondence. That which is above is like to that which is below. And that which is below is like to that which is above. Manifest reality is holographic and self-similar across all scales. The macrocosm, the very large, the totality, and the microcosm, the very small, the individual expressions which comprise the totality, are each reflections of the other. Everything is a self-contained holographic extension of the whole of consciousness. Okay, now let's look at that a minute and what that really means. You, for example, are a holographic subset of consciousness, which comprises potential and vital energy that have come together and expressed as you, as individuated consciousness. Okay? So it's not like oversoul or soul, or I should say oversoul, your core self, took a piece of itself, projected a piece of itself. It's projecting a holographic slice of itself. In other words, a slice that contains all of its aspects, which have been calibrated to this particular physical form. Okay? Now, macrocosm, microcosm. Everything that is unfolding in our 3D reality on this planet is a reflection, therefore, of what's going on in different realities, the greater reality. It's not the same, it's not unfolding in the same way, but it is a reflection of all layers and realms of existence. Now let's go the other direction. This 3D reality and all of its unfoldments are an aggregate reflection of what's going on within most beings, the aggregate creations of all of the beings and entities who are functioning through this reality, and what's going on within each of the beings. What's going on within you? For example, if, and getting back to relationship, if this unfoldment with this other person that you have in mind, this other particular unfoldment, this specific unfoldment that you have in mind with this other person, was more regressive in nature, what is going on within you that's being reflected in this unfoldment? No, perhaps you didn't say anything, or you weren't even thinking anything about that individual until he or she approached you, and then this thing unfolded, this unpleasant interaction. But where are you as a whole? What's going on within you? What aspects of you, again, thoughts being one of them, but what you were experiencing some regressive dominant emotions. Maybe you were feeling really sad, or deeply angry, not at this other person, but just perhaps about life in general, or an exchange you just had with somebody else, or a situation with one of the vendors that you work through, your internet service provider, or you got a nasty phone bill or something. What was going on within you energetically just prior to this exchange between you and the other person? And what was it reflective of? Like I said, was it reflecting your general attitude about life as a whole, this reality, or another specific event? Were you reacting internally, even if you weren't giving it conscious thought? Was your energy off center, off balance in that way? Make some notes. What were you feeling? And your thoughts. Remember, thoughts too. But what was this interchange with the other person reflective of? Both within you and in some way reflective of the greater reality and unfoldments. Macrocosm, microcosm. Look at it within that context so that you become to more deeply understand and embody and begin working in tune with that principle of creation, the principle of correspondence. Okay? The next principle, the third principle, the principle of vibration. Everything moves and vibrates. Nothing is at rest. At the most fundamental level, consciousness comprises vital, vibratory energy. Now, vital energy is the highest level frequency energy. It's vibrating so frequently that it's virtually still, which ties into the next principle, the principle of polarity, which we'll get to shortly. And at the most fundamental level, consciousness comprises vital, vibratory energy manifesting pure creational potential in different ways. Matter, this physical body, the material expression of your consciousness comprising vital energy and potential. Matter is energy in a state of vibratory motion. There is no solidity as such. This is why this physical body is a reflection, the principle of correspondence, of our level of awareness, the level of our density, third density awareness. And therefore, or from which our third dimension perspective unfolds. What we are, where we are in our levels of awareness is how our reality unfolds. Because we're in third density level of awareness, pardon me, our reality, the space, our dimensional reality, the dimensional aspect unfolds from that level of awareness. So this is why we, humans have remained trapped in third dimension experience and perspectives. Okay? Now, getting back to the contextual reference, frame of reference, the principle of vibration, which also ties back into thought, and again, emotions. Whatever you were thinking and feeling had a direct impact on the level of interaction that you had with the other person, by and large. Again, there are exceptions, which I mentioned earlier, but in most situations, the other party is responding to the vibratory, your aggregate vibratory signature comprising your thought energy, your emotion energy, the energy of your three energy centers, the mind field, the heart field, the intuitive creational field, and your overall energy field, your external, so to speak. But the aggregate vibratory level that you were emitting at the point of contact and throughout the unfoldment of the interchange with you and the other individual had a direct impact on how they reacted or responded to you. You have to own that. Energy responds to energy. And at this point, I'm going to, and I'll do a whole video about this, but viewing yourself from the level of understanding that you are an energetic being. You are an individual infused with individuated consciousness, infused with potential and vital energy that just happens to be expressed right now because our level of consciousness, human consciousness, the aggregate, has been so regressed that we are now in a materially dense, being expressed in a materially dense form, expression of energy. But it's still all about energy and the vibratory compatibility. This is how we attract our thoughts. The thoughts that we do, by and large, is energy signature vibratory compatibility. And then certain thoughts come to us. Plus, and they come from the mental plane, and there are different levels of mental planes, even within our density and dimension. But that's how they come to us, vibrational compatibility. So what would you say your aggregate overall energy signature was at the time that you were interacting with this individual? Make notes. What was the overall? Was it more regressive? More progressive? Were either of those dominant? Or were you more in a state of equilibrium? Okay? Vibration, energy. Okay. The next principle, the principle of polarity, which I just touched on a moment ago. There are all of these principles, like everything in reality, everything, all of the infinite number of unique expressions of consciousness are interconnected and interdependent. Everything. So in that sense, we are all of one, but we are not as one. We are individuated consciousness, unique expressions. And to see the wholeness of consciousness does not mean that we think of ourselves as not individuated. Oh, everyone else is just like me. Well, no, they're not. Everyone else is a unique, individuated expression of consciousness as well. And yes, it is through our interactions, whether conscious or subconscious interactions with others, and our reality itself, through which creation unfolds. Everything you think, say, and do has an impact, a creational, co-creational impact on every other expression of consciousness. That's pretty cool and pretty intimidating too. But that's why self-responsibility is fundamental to attaining self-mastery. This is all about claiming full responsibility for every aspect of you. All of your creational tools, thoughts, emotions, actions, your energy centers. This is total self-responsibility. The work of self-mastery is the work of claiming full self-responsibility for all that you are emanating and thus co-creating in our reality. Self-responsibility. Okay. The principle of polarity. Everything is dual in nature. Everything has its poles, its seemingly opposing pair of complements. Complements are the two extremes of one thing, identical in nature, but differing in degree. Thus, all seeming paradoxes are reconcilable. This is where we get into the two fundamental qualities of consciousness, regressive and progressive. And again, there's an article on my website. I will post a link to that. That gives you a really good breakdown of the differences between progressive and regressive consciousness. And it contrasts them nicely so that you start embodying a deep understanding of what the two qualities are, how they unfold, and so that you can become a more progressive dominant co-creator of reality. Okay, the principle of polarity. The whole of unexpressed consciousness unfolds from the ground of pure unconditioned awareness. Consciousness as a whole comprises equal measures of both its progressive and regressive qualities. It is through each unique expression of consciousness that both qualities are infused, and the degree to which each of us comprises these two different qualities depends on a number of things. There are a number of contributing factors, a few of them being what we came into this world with, the from different versions of ourselves, genetics and so forth, from the genetics of our family of origin, whatever conditioning and social engineering we've been exposed to in this lifetime, and various other factors. But we are each a unique admixture. Upon our inception in this world, we're a unique admixture of progressive and regressive qualities of consciousness. And from the moment we come into this world, the conditioning sets in. And so your baseline admixture has probably changed quite dramatically from the time you were an infant, due to the heavy conditioning, due to genetic modifications through external forces, various toxins we've been exposed to, various electromagnetic manipulations, and so forth. So that's polarity. When regressive and progressive consciousness, were they to unfold and meet, so to speak, existence would be no more. Only infinite source, the ground of all creation, the ground of consciousness, the absolute, is at the place of perfect reconciliation between regressive and progressive qualities. And we are not that. We are not infinite source. We unfolded because of infinite source, but we are not that because we are expressed forms. We exist. Therefore, we cannot be, because we exist because of infinite source, but we are apart from that. So, and I'm going to get more in detail into this in detail in my upcoming book. So hang in there with me. But the principle of polarity. So when we understand this, about this mix, our unique admixtures, what was your dominant quality just prior to and during the course of this unfoldment with this other person that you're in relationship with? Was it progressive dominant, regressive dominant, or more from a place of equilibrium? Okay. The next principle, the principle of rhythm. Everything has its tides which flow in and out. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing is inherent. No getting away from that. Rhythm compensates. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Okay. Now I've talked about this principle in terms of our current evolution cycle. The very fact that we are in a regressive dominant cycle of consciousness evolution is that tells us that we have been in one or more progressive dominant evolution cycles, okay? The swing. Now, in terms of this, your relationship with this other person, every relationship goes through cycles. Remember, the principle of correspondence. We are in this grand cycle of consciousness evolution. And within that cycle, as part of that cycle, we have the cosmic cycles, planetary, heavenly body movements, cycles. In this reality, we have the cycle of seasons, constantly one folding into the other. This also pertains to, well, I hate to bring up tides because then that brings the moon into the conversation. I really don't want to talk about the moon because that's a whole separate conversation, but cycles, rhythm and flow, rise and fall. In other words, every relationship has its ups and downs. Okay, so with that in mind, is your relationship with this other person, could it be in either an upswing or perhaps a downswing? Change of cycles. When cycles change, just like the evolutionary process, the unfoldment, sometimes energies get intensified as one cycle unfolds into the next. In terms of weather, look at the weather cycles. Sometimes between seasons, the unfoldment from one season into the next, weather gets a little dicey. The energies, are a little bit chaotic as one season unfolds into the next. The same is true of your relationships, cycles. And so look back at the course of the last, perhaps the last few months of your interactions with this person. If they have been predominantly smooth, progressive consciousness oriented in their nature. And then, recently things have been choppy. The waters have gotten a little choppy. It is quite likely that the relationship could be transitioning from one cycle to the next, from one swing to the next. Could be transitioning into a little less progressive unfoldment of the relationship, or from kind of a regressive overall nature of the relationship into a more progressive relationship. Make notes. Only you can answer these questions. This is what learning all these things is about, to help you make your own wiser choices in all of your creations, in all of your relationships, in all of the situations in your life. The more knowledge of higher order objective truths and your application and understanding of them in your lives, the happier you're going to be, because you're going to be making wiser choices. Principle of rhythm. So make a few more notes. Stop the video if you need to, and consider, if perhaps you're transitioning into another cycle, if the pendulum is swinging in your relationship with this other person. Okay? The next principle, the principle of cause and effect. That's a biggie. That underlies and encompasses all of them. They're all interrelated, all interconnected. But this is a biggie. And you've heard me talk about the balancing process. That's also encompassed in the principle of cause and effect. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to the principles of creation. Nothing escapes them. Chance is but a name for the principles not recognized. The plane of causality holds all power to affect change. Let's look at this one a little more closely. Chance is but a name for the principles not recognized. In other words, there are no accidents in the unfoldment of reality, either in your personal reality or reality as a whole, or the greater reality, the greater context. Everything is flowing and unfolding and ebbing and moving forward according to these principles. Everything, big picture, everything unfolds through these dynamics. And taking this down to your interchange that you brought to mind with this other person, going back to thoughts and emotions and your aggregate energy level, taking this bigger picture context, what can you learn from that? Looking at this interchange with the other person. For example, if they were really moody or emotional, yes, look at your own energies, because there is a direct correlation there. But perhaps they just had a terrible interchange with someone else, or a really great exchange with someone else. Cause and effect, effect and cause. Now, zooming out, the highest level, regressive, progressive qualities. What qualities in your own best sensing, or if you talked with this person, perhaps they told you they had, or they just, their energy, you sensed their energy was different, but you weren't really focused in the moment and you were defensive, if this was a regressive dominant exchange. But it didn't occur to you, because you weren't present moment focused, to step back and say, whoa, 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 whoa. What's going on with you? Is there something going on with you? And perhaps you don't have that kind of relationship with this individual where that sort of thing can be discussed. That's another thing to consider, is why you're in relationship with this person. If it's somebody who's in your inner circle, especially. If you can't even talk about what may be going on in each other's lives to a degree, so that you have a better understanding, this is why it's so important to really come to know and get intimately familiar with your own energy centers, your own patterns of thought and emotion. So that you are highly sensitive, keenly aware, because you're also working through higher, or within the context, from within the context of higher order truths, for example, the 7 principles of creation, so that, and through the non-emotionally, psychologically invested observer, so that you can really begin getting a big picture handle on all that's going on around you, all that's happening around you, your interchanges with other people, from that perspective. And of course, thought and emotion mastery are critical. That's the work that I do with people. You need to really drill down into those areas. But just applying these and working from within the context of objective truths, getting in the flow of these, advances your self-mastery, progress in ways that you can't even imagine. So, principle of cause and effect, the balancing process, being able to step back and look at all of these principles and how they work together, and just when you get to the point where you can go, that's unfolding here. Oh, this and that. That is so empowering. And not just for the sake of, I know that. Not in terms of stroking ego, but from the sense of empowerment, the sense of being able to progress on your journey and to bring that progress back into your co-creations. This ongoing, beautiful unfoldment based in increasingly higher levels of awareness. On and on and on. That's why we're here. Those of us on this journey, that's what awakening really means. That's how we ascend. That's how we advance from one density level of awareness to the next in increments. So the principle of cause and effect. Now, the 7th principle is the principle of gender. Gender simply is. Masculine and feminine principles are inherent in everything. All expressions of consciousness comprise masculine and feminine aspects. And again, that's a unique admixture. It's unique to the expression. And in the same way that progressive and regressive consciousness are inherent in the whole of consciousness in equal measure, so are masculine and feminine, the 2 masculine and feminine aspects, which are really creation modes, the ways through which we create. Both are of equal importance. Both are necessary in order to create. And each of us have these aspects within us. Now, the mental gender comprises the coexistence of masculine, which is largely left brain processes, and feminine aspects, which are largely right brain processes of the mind. Now, when there is an imbalance within us of either gender, these gender aspects, which have nothing to do with the physical form. There is a deep misunderstanding that's been intentionally instilled within humans that associates gender almost solely with the expressed physical form. Men have inherent feminine aspects, and women have inherent masculine aspects. Remember, these are modes and types of creation. 2 baseline examples. Assertiveness is considered a masculine aspect or mode of creation. By comparison, receptivity, openness, is a feminine mode of creation. Now, when you are out of balance, when you are masculine dominant creation mode or feminine dominant creation mode, the specific mode of creation, because remember, there are multiple traits and characteristic modes within modes, if you will, within masculine mode of creation and within feminine mode of creation. And when either masculine or feminine becomes dominant within us, becomes a dominant creation mode, then all of those aspects become distorted. They become regressive in nature. Receptivity turns into submissiveness or kowtowing, for example. Assertiveness turns into intrusiveness, aggressiveness. They're masculine, feminine, everything ties back into when something's out of balance, hence the balancing process, ongoing. Consciousness constantly seeks to balance itself in its regressive and progressive qualities and in its masculine and feminine modes of creation. Constantly ongoing. That's why you and I are different from one moment to the next. Our energy levels are always fluctuating, even if it's just slightly. Constant motion, constant change. Therefore, when we interact with others, these fluctuations, that they have an impact. It changes things. It affects those around us, and they're going through the same things. Perhaps the person that you interacted with was in a really feminine, dominant mode of creation. In other words, his or her thoughts and emotions were in a feminine, dominant frame of reference. Therefore, what was being put out was out of balance. You sensed that. And perhaps then you responded in an out of balance way in response to that energy, if you were not consciously aware and in the moment and consciously choosing your responses to the energy that was emanating from the other. So consider gender. How did the principle of gender come into play? Because it did. All of these principles are always unfolding in every movement of consciousness. Everything's at work, nonstop. The eighth principle, which is sort of the one that binds them all together, is the generative principle. This lost principle is the dynamic of true care driven by real love. And I have a video about that, a commentary, and I'll provide a link to that. If you haven't seen that, you need to watch that too. The seed of life. What we truly care about, not just what we say we care about, but what we truly care about is the driving force. You can't fool consciousness. You might say you care about this and that, but your thoughts, emotions, and actions reflect the truth of what you really care about. What we truly care about is the driving force behind our thoughts and actions and our feelings. It is the ultimate generator of the quality of our experience and reveals itself by way of those things in which we invest our energetic currencies. Our time and our attention on a day in, day out basis. And also how we spend our money. Money is another form of energy. It's another currency. What are you spending your money on? Perhaps, you're saying that, and let's get it back to this relationship, this interchange between you and the other person. Perhaps you say that you really care about people. You really want to work on your relationships with others. And that you care about that. And that you want to improve how you relate to other people. Whether personally or professionally or both. Are you giving focused attention, time and energy to that? Have you invested any money in that? Have you sought out professional help? Or even on your own attention? Or are you spending all of your spare time? And this is not a judgment. This is about being honest with ourselves. Your choices are your choices. But be honest with yourself. Are you really investing your energetic currencies in the things that you say you care about? Perhaps you could be spending more time with this person, more productive time with this other person. Time just to be with him or her. But instead, you've always got something else going on that you give higher priority to. And this person, even though they might say it's okay, and on a subconscious level or an unconscious level, they resent that. So perhaps that's impacting, or it would definitely have some impact on the interchange that you had with this person. What do you really care about? Take a look at what you're thinking and doing and spending your currencies on. That's what you really care about, regardless of what you're telling yourself. Being completely honest with yourself in this process is critical to your ability to keep progressing in your work. Lying to yourself undercuts everything. Doesn't matter whatever practices you're doing, energy clearing and so on. If you lie to yourself, you negate all of your other efforts. And again, this isn't about beating up on yourself, blaming, judging, criticizing yourself, but having the courage to say, wow, this is what I'm doing. This is what I said. This is what I was thinking. This is how I've been spending my energetic currencies. I've said this. I've said that I care about this or that. But that's not what my thoughts, actions, and behaviors don't reflect that. So, complete, utter honesty. If you can't be honest with yourself, who can you be honest with? Okay? I think on that note, I'll call it a wrap. I actually made it through all 7, even the 8th principle, and I hope that this gave you a better idea of how to work from within the context of objective truth, higher order objective truth in your day-to-day actions. In this case, the example I used was your relationships, because our relationships are such a big part of our co-creative undertakings, how we relate to other people, how you relate to yourself. That's where the self-honesty comes in. How are you treating yourself? Is it an ego-based love? or real love-driven, core self-driven love for yourself? How do you relate to you? Are you infatuated with yourself? Or do you just sort of annoy yourself, or you aggravate yourself? What is your relationship with you? That's at the very heart of how you relate to everyone else. And when you begin truly embodying, working within the context, through the context of what you really are and why you're really here, that provides the basis for real love, real self-love can start coming into the fold. And from that, real love of other. Okay? Well, if you found this information helpful, I hope you'll share it with your fellow travelers. If you haven't already subscribed, I hope you'll subscribe, and either on YouTube or on my website. If you subscribe on my website, you also gain access to being notified of when any other publications come up, articles or any other resources I'm posting. And I know it's been a while. The frequency of my videos and my articles has slowed a bit because, as I touched on earlier, I'm in the process of working on a book about self-mastery. And that'll be coming out in like I said, hopefully the next few months. And I'll be talking more about that along the way. I'm very excited about it. It's going to be a very powerful and empowering tool for many of you. And I'm anxious to get it out there. I will be publishing it in online format, electronic format, not going to go through the physical publishing process for a number of reasons, but it will be, as soon as it's finished, it will be readily available for you to buy it. So I'm anxious and excited about that. It's got a lot of good stuff, and I'll go a little more into detail in an upcoming commentary as to what all the book will address and what's going to include. So anyway, on that note, take care on your journeys. Stay safe and true to your journey and true to yourself. And I look forward to being with you next time. Until then,